Boom, let's talk about it. Okay, 210.19. This is conductors, minimum ampacity and size, under 600 volts. So as electricians, most of what we do is going to be in conductors less than 600 volts. And the ampacity and size actually is about the conductor itself. Get into it. Okay, so 1A, continuous loads or combination of continuous non-continuous loads must have an ampacity rating not less than 125% of the continuous load, referencing 310.14. So let's talk about what a continuous load is. A continuous load is a load that draws current for more than 3 hours at a time. Heaters are continuous loads. Lights in industrial buildings are continuous loads. Lights in houses are not continuous loads. Things like receptacles, generally not considered a continuous load. Pumps, continuous load. Anything that's going to run for more than 3 hours is going to be considered a continuous load. And in that case, you have to upsize your wire and your breaker to 125% of that continuous loads rating. We actually did a video where we installed a space heater in a client's garage, and the space heater rating was 30 amps, but we didn't run 30 amp wire and we didn't put a 30 amp breaker in it because you actually have to size that wire and that breaker at 125% of that continuous load. That heater is a continuous load. It requires that 125% correction factor. There you go. B is a little complicated in its wording, but it says not less than the load to be served. 310.15. It has to be capable of serving the load you put it to. Easy. Okay, 2. Conductors supplying receptacles shall have the ampacity not less than the rating of the branch circuit. Okay. The rating of the branch circuit is determined by the overcurrent protection device. A 20 amp circuit has a 20 amp breaker on it. So the ampacity of the wire attached to the 20 amp breaker has to be at least 20 amps. It is very common practice to put a number 10 wire on a 20 amp breaker, both for voltage drop and for derating through conduit, but you cannot go less than. Cool. 3. This is small, very specific little code section, but household cooking devices. Household, not industrial, not commercial. Household cooking devices are not to be less than the load served, and anything over 8 3/4 kilowatts, the branch circuit shall be 40 amps. So this is just real specific to houses and dwelling units. If you have an oven that draws over 8 3/4 kilowatts, that's going to be a 40 amp breaker, and that's just the way it's going to be. Number 4, this is where we kind of get this minimum 14 gauge wire thing. Any branch circuit has got to be sufficient for the load, not less than 14 AWG. So whereas an 18 gauge wire can probably hold 5 or 6 amps, and your load may be 1 1/4 amps. Say you have some LED lighting in a room all on its own breaker, you're only going to be pulling half an amp. But because of this code section, even though an 18 gauge wire might be sufficient for the load, you cannot run anything less than 14 AWG. This is where that minimum comes from, is this code section. So that's your code for today.